Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Foster Data Culture with Data Intelligence Technology. Our speaker today is Aaron Kalb, who is a co-founder and Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Alation. Just a quick note before we get started, shortly after today's presentation, the replay will be available, and we'll make sure to give that to you through your email. And with that, I'll hand things over to Aaron to get started.
Thank you, Nolan. Very excited to talk about this topic today. When I talk to our customers and CDOs and data leaders, all around the world, two of the questions I get asked most often are, what do you mean by data culture on the one hand, or the people who are like, I know what data culture is, I want it really badly, how do I get a data culture for my organization? And I'm excited to share a hypothesis we have about how to do that with all of you today. To answer those questions. So we're going to start again with talking about what is data culture by first defining culture and then organizational culture and ending with data culture, which is a particular type of organizational culture, spoiler alert. Talk a bit about why we want data culture for those of you who aren't already on the data culture train, but spend the bulk of the time today describing how we can get data culture and look at the role that technology can play in that, starting a little bit philosophically with the role technology plays in influencing culture generally, and then diving into data intelligence technology, including a data catalog, and how those can bring about data culture specifically in your organization. So let's dive in. What is culture? Perhaps when you hear the word culture, you sort of picture the National Geographic covers, the bright, colorful cultural clothing of different peoples around the world, or the less bright, colorful uniform of a Silicon Valley venture capitalist. Hi, Greg. But wherever you live, whatever culture, subculture you're a part of, there are sort of norms you follow. Some you think about, some you don't even think about. But culture is more than that. Culture actually encompasses these things that are invisible to the naked eye, at first glance at least, the values and beliefs that people hold, and the way those values and beliefs get manifested in their behavior, in the patterns of activity that they engage in. So when we talk about organizational culture or corporate culture referring to things within for-profit enterprises, organizational, same idea, but broader, including nonprofit organizations, governments, schools, universities, military organizations, etc. Any group of people, it doesn't have to be a national group or an ethnic group. If you're working with people, you will have cultural norms that develop, and you'll influence the culture, and the culture will influence you. This is a quote from the Harvard Business Review, though they're actually citing sort of a common wisdom. I'm sure almost everyone on this webinar has heard the idea that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I've heard it as lunch, culture eats strategy for lunch. I've never heard anybody claim that strategy trumps culture, because when you're in a meeting room, obviously the executive team would hope that the big strategy deck or presentation is the first thing on everyone's mind, and that's going to determine what decisions get made. But the organizational culture is going to play a major role in which ideas are spoken, which ideas are heard, which ideas end up winning out. And so data culture is a idea about how that should go, which ideas should win, which ideas will be valued, who gets heard, etc. So McKinsey defines data culture very succinctly, saying data culture is decision culture, and we can put that into context by comparing data culture to other organizational cultures. There are many different organizational cultures. As we go through this, keep an eye out or an ear open for attributes of the culture of your current organization, or perhaps of organizations you worked at in the past. We're not going to cover every organizational culture, but we'll cover two that are very common before getting to data culture. So one is consensus culture, personified or signified here by these preschoolers holding hands, because a consensus culture is a really friendly, feel-good sort of place What is valued above all else in a consensus culture is agreement. Consensus cultures love agreement and sort of abhor conflict and anyone feeling left out or overruled or unhappy. So it can feel very fuzzy day to day. But the decisions that a consensus culture winds up making are definitionally not controversial, because anything that anyone would veto just couldn't be done. It would violate the cultural norms. And this can have some negative consequences, because a consensus culture will wind up moving slowly, since it takes a while to get everyone to agree on anything, and often cannot innovate over time, because an innovative idea that would be really great in the long term can seem scary to at least somebody in the beginning. So it won't really take root in a consensus culture. On the opposite end of the spectrum is a hierarchical culture. There's other ways you can talk about this, but I think this image is very helpful to think about hierarchical culture because of two key features. One is the idea of the hippo, the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. In a hierarchical culture, the hippo tends to win the day. It sort of chomps up all the rest and wins, because these cultures really value status or seniority. And so the person with the highest title or the longest tenure will overrule everybody else, even if their ideas are better and better supported by the evidence. The other thing you'll see in this little picture, this hippo is about to, it looks like, eat this little bird there, and the bird sort of symbolizes the idea of a pecking order, right? And there's a top and there's certainly a bottom. And these cultures wind up crushing creativity, because if you're just the quote unquote lowly intern, even if you have the best idea and all the data points in your direction, you might not even feel comfortable speaking up. And if you do, people might ignore you, even laugh at you. I mean, it can get pretty brutal. Hierarchical cultures aren't always bad. They can be really appropriate, for example, in certain military contexts, but they can be very stifling, and they can also lead to the wrong decisions getting made, because often the person with the highest title doesn't have the brightest idea in a given conference room. So with those two examples out there, hierarchical cultures can move fast, but they can do the wrong thing. Consensus cultures move slowly and can miss an opportunity. Data culture is hopefully a sort of a Goldilocks, optimal place. In a data culture, what's valued above all else is evidence and reason. And so a data culture will choose to do the right thing based on what's happening in the world and the information that you have about that in your data sets. And so as a result, you win against competitors who are moving too slowly, or who are, just doing what the boss says, even if the emperor has no clothes. And I'm just asserting that. And in a hierarchical culture, I might, cite my fancy title to say, you should believe me, that data cultures win. And in a consensus culture, you guys might all nod along and agree with me, because you don't want to create conflict by disagreeing. But in the data culture, you should all absolutely be skeptical and say, hey, what do you mean we're winning? Why do you say that? And to prove my point, I should be able to supply quantitative evidence sourced from a reputable source that has a good methodology. And thankfully, in this case, I think I do. I'm going to cite quickly. There's a lot of research on this. Here's some interesting stuff from Forrester. Here in their context, they use the term insights-driven businesses. There definitely is different terminology used by different sources, but they're talking about the same sort of a phenomena we were just describing on the prior slide. And they observe that these businesses that have a data culture are going to earn a lot more revenue, are going to monetize their existing data investments, and will be much more likely to grow at a faster rate. So exciting research here, just a little bit of a lot of research about how data culture results in winning in an empirical way. This is why we should have data culture, because it helps. And if you're considering prioritizing data culture, then you're in good company. Here, moving from Forrester to Gartner, I think annually will survey chief data officers, about 300 of them, and they gave this list you can see here on the right of about 16 different multiple choice options for what are most critical to have data and analytics success, including some very practical, tangible things, but the number one item, we've zoomed in here on the top 6. You can see there's sort of a statistically insignificant, 5-way tie for second, but head and shoulders above the rest is data culture, the single most likely item of all of them. And you can see by the end, you get less than 10%, well, less than 10%. It's the single highest item listed in the top 3 things CDOs want. So data culture, we know what it is. We know that we want it. How do we get it? Before talking about data culture specifically, let's look at what influences human behavior in general. There's a lot that's been written about this by economists and philosophers and business leaders. Incentive programs, education and training, definitely all important. What about technology? Could technology possibly change culture? In some of the definitions of culture, technology like art and literature and language and sports and leisure are things that emerge from culture. Can technology actually itself change culture? Really? Is that possible? Is that just Silicon Valley hubris to suggest that technology could change something that's all about people and behavior? Well, spoiler alert, I think the answer is yes. And in fact, not only do I think it is possible for technology to change culture, I actually think technology can change culture more powerfully, to a greater degree and at a faster rate than any of those other levers that we might have. And again, because it's not a consensus culture, I don't expect you to disagree with me. I'm going to try to prove it with some evidence and examples over the coming slides. Starting with this widely held belief about our modern culture being uniquely characterized by oversharing and self-promotion. This is something that most people in my social orbit, I think, would agree with. I think I've said things like this myself occasionally. And the things that make me believe this are things like this, that if we go on to Instagram and look at the hashtag food porn here, you can see 250 million posts just on this one social network with this one hashtag of people taking pictures of their food. I sound like a grandpa saying this, but like, who cares what you had for breakfast? What's going on? What is wrong with our culture today? So hold this image in your mind, especially this very juicy beef patty here in this picture, and hold that thought about this unique modern phenomenon of pictures of food, because it actually isn't totally unique. If we zoom back, we have this Cézanne oil painting here, which is characterized by the museum housing it in English, translated as a still life of a plate of peaches. So this is something somebody might eat, rendered by a great master painter a couple hundred years ago. And of course, this is in English, and emoji might, call it something like this, but a long tradition of food pictures that actually goes back even further. So we're staying here in France, but moving over to Lascaux, going 17,000 years back from our present time, approximately, using carbon dating and similar techniques, as I understand it. And unknown artists used pigment on a cave wall to draw these images of ancient cows called aurochs. So we have people with their juicy hamburger from their, hipster restaurant. But even 17,000 years ago, humans were making images of what they're going to eat. Okay, hold that thought. The other big sign of our unique modern culture of shameless self-promotion and self-absorption are the number of selfies. Almost 500 million posts just on Instagram with the hashtag. Of course, there are selfies in other places. Not all of them have the hashtag for metadata. So, tons and tons of selfies because we're so self-absorbed now. And yet, 500 years ago, 510 years ago, in fact, Leonardo da Vinci, one of the great portrait artists and artists in general and inventors of our time, drew a picture of himself in his notebook, seen here. And back to Lascaux, it's not the only one of its kind. I actually heard recently about a far more ancient set of similar cave paintings, I believe in Southeast Asia, recently discovered. But anyway, we'll look at Lascaux for now. a little ways over from those drawings of the ancient cows, the aurochs, we see these handprints. People put their own hand up and put pigment around it to leave an outline as a way of showing the world, here we are, we're all here together. It's sort of the ancient equivalent of this famous Oscar selfie here on the right. So, so what we see is that the value and the belief and the interest in expressing, here we are, here's what we're going to eat, that actually goes back a long time into way before there was written history, and probably farther yet. We just don't have the evidence for it. And the difference now is not that we've become more self-absorbed and our values have changed and what we as humans want to do has changed. It's just that it's gotten easier to do it. It's easier to self-promote now than it's ever been. When Da Vinci wanted to make this self-portrait, first of all, he is believed by many to be a genius. But even beyond that, he spent decades sort of training himself to have the skills to do this, and then thousands of individual marks in chalk on paper, and maybe many drafts that we don't have to get this self-portrait. If we contrast that with what it took to get this self-portrait, with all the technology built into a camera, built into the internet, this person is not necessarily Leo da Vinci. She says here, I'm just a girl sitting in front of a camera asking if this is Instagram-worthy winky face, and this technology makes it so easy to take the image and even to filter it in this classic way. Don't need Photoshop skills or anything anymore. Probably the most work that was put into this was maybe in getting ready to sit for it and in picking all of these incredible hashtags listed here, which is of course metadata, but that's a talk for another day. The punchline is that technology makes things easier, going all the way back to pre-Lascaux times with the wheel, reducing friction to make motion easier. And so if we're trying to change human behavior, we can look at how might we change human behavior, how might technology fit in, what are the different hypotheses about what people do? Do people do the right thing? Obviously not. Just look at today's headlines to learn that people do not always do, or maybe frequently do the right thing. Some say people don't do the right thing, they do what they want to do, but that also isn't quite true, because if we all did what we wanted to do, we all would have cleaned the attic or the garage, written the next great American novel. We have all these things we want to do that we haven't done. No, instead we've played Candy Crush or doom scrolled on the internet or whatever we've done, because human beings fundamentally do what's easy. I think we all know that from watching our friends and our peers, and if we're honest, watching ourselves. And that's why technology is so interesting and important, because whatever you make easy is what's going to happen. We often say that technology is good, quote unquote, when it makes it easier for us to do the things we want to do, like take selfies or food pics. I would argue that technology is doing good when it makes it easier for us to do the right thing. And the best technology, I would argue, does both of these at once. We've all seen examples of the opposite of this, when we make it too easy to do a thing that people really shouldn't be doing. We saw that back in the 90s with word art, or to use a more data-y example, these 3D pie charts, which came a little bit later. They're almost never the right thing to do. If you guys are folks who know about data visualization, there's a lot of distraction here. Pie charts in general are hard to interpret in terms of the angle size, etc. We are actually in this presentation in the very small orange sliver of times when a pie chart, 3D pie chart, could be appropriate. So let's not make it so easy to do these things we shouldn't be doing. As an example, to be a little bit self-aware, all of these gonzo transitions where things are burning up and exploding and falling down, I would not take the time to animate those frame by frame the way the first Disney movies were made. You've made it too easy for me to do it, in this case with Apple Keynote, and so I'm doing it when I shouldn't. To use a more serious example than just a bad visualization because it's a little bit garish, here's an example of a visualization that's bad because it's false. It's telling lies. Often technology has made it easier to tell lies with data than to uncover the truth in data. So here, looking at the honest version of this data set, we see that the actual data here over time is almost completely flat revenues. It's obviously a completely fictional example here with nice round numbers, but you see that if the y-axis goes as everybody would imagine from 0 at the bottom, the line goes straight across. But technology makes it so easy for me to set this arbitrary minimum that makes the growth look exponential, and there's no way you could tell. It doesn't even show the little indicator that we've skipped some values there. So this is technology making it easy to tell lies, which is not good technology. Good technology would be more like a good GPS navigation system, right? It would be good tech that makes it easier to get where we want to go by saying, even if I'm in an unfamiliar town, what I should do and when I should do it. Go 4.1 miles, then turn right. And while it's helping me get where I want to go, this is actually tech for good, because it makes it easier for me to get there in the right way, to follow the speed limit and avoid hurting somebody or myself. And so it's doing both those things at once. Can we take the lessons of a great GPS device and apply them to data culture? Well, let's find out. Let's start again by looking at human behavior. Start with the hypothesis, and then we can address it. When we look at peers who are making what look to us like bad decisions without using data, we might think they're doing it because they're evil or just they're super arrogant. They're probably not evil. They're, some of them might be arrogant, but that I don't think is the most common reason. It might feel like they don't even care about making the right choice. But I think it's quite unlikely that they don't want to make the wrong choice. Everyone is embarrassed when they do the wrong thing. I think there's actually some very good reasons why people aren't using data, because getting the data is too hard if they have to do it themselves, or it takes too long if they're dependent on others. Actually, it takes too long either way, but can be frustrating waiting around if you're depending on others. They're also not using data, I think, because the data often isn't clear or correct or understandable. It's something we hear about a lot. What's the point of getting data if you don't even know how to use it? Or maybe they know what it means, but they're not sure that it's right. They're afraid they'll misinterpret the data. Or, per a couple of slides ago with the exponential curve, it's actually flat. Maybe they're scared of somebody misleading them. They're not sure they can trust what they're seeing. These are all actually really good reasons not to use data. People aren't illogical. It's not whether you're not using data because they don't want to be logical. They actually have logical reasons for not using the data to help them make logical decisions. So let's see if we can address those in the same way that the wheel makes it easier to move things, and the smartphone makes it easier to take and publish selfies. And to use a metaphor we'll actually drill back into, the way something like Google Maps makes it easier to get where you want to go and figure out where you want to go. Let's make it easier to get data culture. The three things you need to knock down each of those three objections are data search and discovery, so you can find the relevant data fast, in that room where you're making the decision or just before that meeting, not something you have to get, months early. Then you need data literacy, and that's going to require some training, education, and things, but tech can really help so that when you see data, you can understand what it is, where it came from, you can interpret it correctly. And finally, for that last objection, you need data governance, so you can trust that the data that you found and understood is accurate and appropriate to use in the context you're using it. Appropriate both from a legal compliance perspective, but also appropriate from an accuracy and relevance perspective. And the way you get all of that is through technology for data intelligence as a platform for each of these things. And the core element that a data intelligence platform needs is an enterprise data catalog, and ideally one that has intelligence, collaboration, guided navigation, active governance, and broad, deep connectivity, which is what these icons represent. And we'll talk about this more in line. So look, there's a lot of folks who talk about data intelligence and data cataloging out there. I'd encourage you to learn everything you can as part of your data culture, but representing Alation, I'm now going to talk about how Alation specifically offers what we believe is a best-in-class enterprise data catalog and data intelligence suite, and how it can give each of those three key pillars of a data culture for your organization. Let's start with data search and discovery. starting with the search part. Here you can see in Alation how I can go to a full page search experience and see all these various types of analysis. Of course, we also offer some nice natural language search features, and you can see all the different dashboards and other things that are relevant here. Hundreds of examples just with the search. You can also just search very easily from the home page, not just see dashboards, but see business glossary terms, SQL queries people have written, data tables and columns. In addition to search, you can actually discover and browse. You can see things curated by your admins or just browse there on the left-hand navigation amid data sources, data APIs, file systems and data lakes, a query catalog, various textual information, things in BI tools, things my peers have said. You should be able to search across all data assets of all these big types, of all the different databases and viz tools. All of that should be searchable and discoverable in one place. And in this case, it is the Alation catalog at this fictional company, Alation. So that's the importance of broad, deep connectivity with search and discovery over it. Without a data intelligence platform with a catalog, getting data is too hard, takes too long. That's why folks don't make data-driven decisions. But with intelligent data catalog, this becomes easy, as you just saw. All right, next objection was about understanding the data and about clarity. Data literacy, again, can require training programs. You can watch our other webinars about that or read all about it. But technology can absolutely provide aids to data literacy for data understanding. Things like previews of the data itself, but that alone might not be self-explanatory. You can have curated descriptions written by data stewards or subject matter experts. But you can also get really relevant behavioral context and collaboration, the conversations people are having, information about who the steward or SME is for a given data set. Various properties of the data, including we see popularity there. If people who I really trust are documenting the data or using the data, that can help me interest data myself. More on that later. I can also see metadata on the domain. If I see who's using it and they're in my business unit, that can be a sign that it's relevant or a sign about how to interpret the given metric. So all this rich content can really help understand the data in context. And we can liken this to what you would see, again, in this Google Maps example, right? We see information about how to get where you're going. We see, okay, what lane should you be in? What are the traffic conditions? What's all the context around the street that you're on? These are the same things that can help you, navigate data in the way you would navigate a new city with a tool like this. And again, the key elements here are the collaboration features and some of the intelligence about who's using what. Just like Google here is showing the traffic on your route, a tool like Alation will tell you, who's using it and what way they're using it without even having to talk to them with active collaboration. So that's an example of how technology can help with data literacy and change the data-free behavior people are engaging in because the data isn't clear, isn't correct, isn't understandable. We can add all that context in an intelligent data catalog to make the data understandable and support data literacy. So the last reason people don't use data is because they lack data governance needed for trust. And for data governance, you want to have a guided navigation and you want to have active data governance. And here's what we mean by that. Here is the Alation query tool Compose. And you see that as I'm writing, in the same way that if I am writing a document in Microsoft Word, it will do a red squiggle if I misspell a word, even though honestly a misspelling can just be slightly embarrassing. If I'm writing SQL and I use the wrong data set, it won't just be slightly embarrassing. I might actually get the wrong answer and cost my company a ton of money, or just miss an opportunity to make a lot of money or serve our customers better. So you can see here we have a feature called Trust Check, in which we have these yellow highlights. They'll be red if it's a more a severe issue, and you can mouse over and see whether the data you're about to use is appropriate for use, is trustworthy. In this case, the note is about compliance. This is personally identifiable information that can only be used in certain contexts, but just as easily there could be a warning saying, hey, this data is stale, it's out of date, it has low data quality, it is the wrong definition of a metric, and thus help you get the right decision. So that's a way to avoid a mistake, a way to know that what you're using is trustworthy. Here's an example of, again, a data tables catalog page, an Alation catalog. I can see that it's been endorsed, kind of given the green light for use by the steward, who in this demo example is named Stu Ward, very cute. I can also see information from an automated tool or from curators about the data quality, the completeness, the conformity of the values, the recency of those numbers. See, this is, a green, highly accurate, highly complete data set here. I can complement that information with social behavioral metadata. Again, gleaned from parsing the query logs. Alation will tell you who's using this data set, how often the data set is being used. Generally, things that are used a lot by good people tend to be trustworthy, and we can complement that with these endorsements and data quality indications. And so that is super helpful to make the data not just easy and understandable, but also trustworthy, and go from a place where people aren't making decisions without data, because it's hard to get the data, hard to understand the data. They're concerned about being misled by the data. When we make it easy, understandable, and trustworthy, people will make decisions with data, and they'll be in that situation when they have an intelligent data catalog, a data catalog for the whole enterprise that has intelligence, that has collaboration, active governance, guided navigation, broad connectivity, all that baked into the enterprise data catalog and data intelligence platform. They can find information fast with data search and discovery, understand it with data literacy, trust it with data governance, and ultimately get the success that they want for their organization, because they'll have a culture that does the right thing, does the best idea no matter who comes up with it, and moves at the speed of business. So we all want success. We want that for your business. We at Alation are here trying to have data culture in as many organizations around the world as possible. We're also tracking how many organizations are data driven and have data culture, and to what extent. We do that through our quarterly State of Data Culture report, and you can download yours right now by going to alation.com/dataculture21 to see how things are going into this new calendar year. So there's the URL again. Hope you'll learn more about that, and thank you all for your time today.
Excellent. Thanks, Aaron. That was a great presentation. And just as a reminder, this will be available shortly after today's presentation, so shortly after right now. And feel free to watch again or share with your colleagues. Thanks, Aaron, for the great presentation, and thanks everybody who was able to make it today.